Welcome, everyone. My name is Alicia Jackson, and I am the Instructional Design Specialist with ASFPM. I'd like to welcome you to the National Policy Briefing for February 2026. Before we begin today, there are a couple of routine admin items to mention. These are monthly high-level briefings that will take about 30 minutes of your time. They are recorded, so if you need to reference them in the future, they'll become available to you in about a week, if not sooner. There is a Q&A feature within Zoom that you should see on your screen, usually near the bottom. You can write out your questions and we will take them at the end as time allows. Lastly, this policy briefing is not eligible for CECs. Today, our agenda items consist of a Washington update covering DHS appropriations, NFIP status, and the Farm Bill status, Small Business Administration interim final rule and ASFPM webinar, EPA request for comments on the new 401 Water Quality Certification Rule, ASFPM Board Retreat Recap, FEMA Review Council Report, and a Q&A. Starting us off today with our first agenda item, the Washington update, is David Conrad, the ASFPM Water Resource Policy Specialist. Go ahead, David.
Okay, thanks, Alicia. Well, Washington update. As most of you know, the federal shutdown currently applies only to the Department of Homeland Security, which is not funded through the remainder of the fiscal year, meaning September 30th. DHS funding ran out Friday, February 13th. The other 11 federal appropriations bills have now been enacted, and the major hangup for Homeland Security is the impasse between Democrats and Republicans over the conditions for ICE in its immigration law enforcement activities. The Consolidated Appropriations Bill, H.R. 7148, did carry an authorization extension of the NFIP through the end of fiscal year 2026, authority for flood insurance sales and renewals, and extension borrowing authority from the Treasury to replenish the disaster relief fund if needed. FEMA staff that are labeled as essential are working without paychecks, and others are likely to be furloughed. The disaster relief fund is adequately funded for now. FEMA staff labeled, DHS Secretary Noam has paused all FEMA non-disaster activities to conserve resources for FEMA's immediate disaster response activities. Numerous long-term recovery planning and mitigation funding and new start projects, a lot of them have been delayed. And right now, there is no clear path for resolving the Department of Homeland Security appropriations impasse. The Senate tried to pass the bill on Tuesday, but it failed to reach the 60-vote threshold required for cloture to cut off debate. The Democrats and Republicans are apparently still far apart over ICE and immigration. Many NFIP mitigation and mapping activities have also essentially been halted. Again, the NFIP extended through the end of FY26, or with its extension, existing flood insurance policies can be renewed and new policies issued. There should be no particularly noticeable impact on the insurance component of NFIP. The congressional legislative calendar is compressing rapidly for any movement on NFIP reform authorization, although congressional staff are still taking input. The same is true for the FEMA Act, H.R. 4669, which, as you may recall, would extract FEMA from the Department of Homeland Security and make it an independent agency, and has a fairly long list of FEMA disaster program reforms. The bill was reported out of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee in September, and it is being what they called held at the desk, awaiting potential floor action. However, there is still no companion bill in the Senate. There are some talks underway among a group of bipartisan senators, but there is nothing at this point to share other than there does appear to be interest. Finally, we are especially following developments regarding the surface transportation legislation, a Corps of Engineers Water Resources Development Act, and a potentially pared down farm bill. The last surface transportation bill, which back in 2021 became the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or was otherwise called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, with many additional provisions beyond highways and transportation added. The IIJA expires at the end of 2026, and it needs to be reauthorized or extended. And that seems to be a pretty strong feeling, bipartisan, in both houses. The public works committees are cranking into gear this month. And ASFPM and a number of our partner organizations would like to see attention put to designing culverts and bridges with floodplain management and future conditions taken seriously into account. Action is almost certain on a core WRDA bill, where the House Transportation Committee is beginning to move forward now. ASFPM is concerned that the Corps maintain a focus on non-structural and nature-based designs as part of the Corps' toolbox for flood risk management. And there is also interest in the agriculture committees on a pared down farm bill. ASFPM would especially like to see attention to the emergency watershed program, which has helped rural areas reduce flood damages in several ways. There may be difficult issues that arise between the food security SNAP program needs and traditional farm community funding needs. That wraps up my update, and I'll turn it back to you, Alicia.
Thanks, David. For our next topic, Small Business Administration, Interim Final Rule, and the ASFPM webinar, we will hear from Chad Verginnis, the ASFPM Executive Director. Passing it to you now, Chad.
Great. Thank you, Alicia. And good afternoon, everyone. So over the past month or so, ASFPM has been really trying to study and understand the SBA interim final rule that was published in the Federal Register on January 29th. And I can put the link to that in the chat after I'm done with this portion of the briefing. The interim final rule document, let's see here, and I'll also put the reference number, but essentially what it does is the interim final rule is to implement a President Trump executive order that was focused on speeding up the recovery and rebuilding in Southern California. With this interim final rule, some of the concerns that have been raised include a very direct and clear federal preemption of state and local standards when it comes to permitting processes. And it also creates a new self-certification mechanism that is stated that can be used in lieu of local and state permitting processes if certain triggers are met. And it goes on to essentially prohibit enforcement of those state and local statutes or standards through things like enforcement actions or stop work orders or the such. So what it's really set up, I think, is it has significant issues constitutionally, where this seems to be a test of the supremacy clause and whether or not that essentially is something that trumps the 10th Amendment. There are significant procedural issues that have been raised. Whenever you have an agency doing rulemaking, there are standards to be followed through the Administrative Procedures Act, and many of those procedures appear not to have been followed. But maybe most importantly to communities is that there are significant implementation issues and questions on this interim final rule. We don't have much time today to get into all of those, but we will be submitting later today comments to the Federal Register related to the interim final rule, expressing many of our concerns. And I think from the implementation standpoint, the take-home message is this is the wrong solution to a problem that I think all of us would agree is something that could be improved, which is to try to have faster permitting after a disaster. But it's an entirely wrong solution set. And but then also invite all of you, and hopefully all of you have already signed up for our webinar that starts at noon Eastern tomorrow, where both myself and Kristen Shedd, who formerly was an attorney at FEMA headquarters dealing with regulatory issues, will be briefing out on this in much, much more detail that way. So another thing to be aware of is that SBA has now spun up a web page and even some forms to implement this interim final rule. ASFPM was among 5 other nonprofit organizations that was invited to have a bit of a Q&A session yesterday with SBA officials. And so we have at least, I think, a little bit more insight into, not only why the rule was created, but also I think in terms of some of the practical limits that the SBA is going to have in terms of administering and enforcing this thing. And I think some of the key questions of, community liability, builder liability, homeowner liability, should a community choose to follow this process that way as well. So again, a lot more to come, and probably certainly in next month's briefing, we can make sure that we post the comments to the interim final rule, or else we'll also have those in any of our newsletters as well. So with that, Alicia, I'll move it on to the next presenter.
Thanks, Chad. Next, we will hear from David again to discuss the EPA request for comments on the new 401 water quality certification rule. Go ahead, David.
All right, thanks, Alicia. Here we are again. This was one we wanted to give at least a short announce or discussion of. Just literally as of February 17th, the EPA made some changes in their rules regarding Section 401 of the Clean Water Act, which is the state and tribal provision of the Clean Water Act that allows states and tribes to condition permits for projects not that discharge pollution or dredge and fill into the nation's waterways. We are quite concerned regarding this rule that substantially constrains basically all aspects of the authority and timing for state and tribal implementation of Section 401 certifications. And I just was looking at EPA listed a half dozen presidential executive orders as part of the justification of their rule. The rulemaking was initiated by a Federal Register notice on January 15th, with a 30-day comments period that ended last week on February 17th. And it was titled Updating the Water Quality Certification Regulations. The background and rule can be found on regulations.gov, and I may drop that site into the chat. The primary effect of this rule is to limit most aspects of state and tribal authority in carrying out their review and conditioning over federally licensed or permitted projects. It constrains the timing and information that states and tribes may require to regarding information that is readily or to only information that is readily available, limiting the scope of project review and conditioning by focusing only on the discharge into navigable waters and not review the whole project and its impacts as the current rules state. It muddies whether Section 401 applies to general permits. Today, approximately 95% of the Corps of Engineers regulatory workload is processed under general permits. So that's significant. And it also casts doubt on whether states and tribes can enforce conditions once a permit is issued, even if the basis of the permit conditions is state or tribal law. So this Section 401 rule was issued, just like the SBA rule that Chad talked about, as an interim final rule, meaning it goes into effect when the proposed rule is published and could be subject to finalization or amendment after the public comments period ends, although it also wouldn't have to be. It could just stand as the rule. And one reason that ASFPM has serious concerns about this rule is that by greatly constraining the basis upon which states can condition or deny a permit, states may be less able to enforce state laws intended to discourage unwise, high-risk development in floodplains. The Federal Clean Water Act was designed to support a cooperative federalism approach that is clearly being undermined by this rule. And many are saying they believe this rule will most likely be challenged in court. But in the meantime, states and tribes should be aware that this clean water authority has been seriously weakened. Again, that's the end of my comment. And Alicia.
Thanks, David. Up next is Meg Galloway, ASFPM's Senior Policy Advisor, discussing the ASFPM Board Retreat. Go ahead, Meg, when you're ready.
Thanks, Alicia. We wanted to provide a quick update on the winter meeting of the ASFPM Board of Directors. It's significant that because this is the first time the board meeting was held in Washington, D.C. Fortunately, it provided to be an economical option as we obtained free meeting space and reasonable hotel costs near the Nationals baseball stadium due to it being kind of cold and off-season. More importantly, in addition to having a productive board meeting, including updating the goals and objectives, the Washington visit allowed the board members who were able to go to the Hill and educate their elected officials on issues of importance to the association and their states. Some board members who could not visit their own congressional representatives attended visits with other board members to get a feel for how these meetings go. In all, we had 27 visits with Senate staffers from 15 different states. Participants updated the offices on the legislative priorities for ASFPM, highlighting the need for NFIP reform and long-term reauthorization. They also shared concerns around the lack of NOFOs for the cooperating technical partner and other significant FEMA programs. And then each board member shared issues and concerns from their home states as well. While the meeting with their congressional representatives seemed really daunting to some board members who had never done it before, the event got positive feedback from those who attended, and it may be something we look to do in the future. The reality is, while the board team frequently conducts similar meetings with key while the policy team frequently conducts similar meetings with key congressional staff, having a constituent from their area at an in-person meeting is even more impactful. And with that, I will turn it back to Alicia.
Thanks, Meg. For our last agenda item today, we will hear from Chad once again to discuss the FEMA Review Council report. Go ahead, Chad.
Thank you, Alicia. And before we get to this topic, if I could just provide also one follow-up comment on the board retreat that way. And, as Meg mentioned, we had the opportunity to visit, I believe, over 20 Senate offices representing our board members and folks that were there in DC. And one of the things I was at least encouraged by is that a number of the offices were very attentive when it came to the concerns we expressed on the mapping funding, flood map funding, and mapping program, including both PTS contracts and CTP contracts. While the issues of hazard mitigation funds being held up has been in the media for the better part of a year, some of the offices replied it was the first time they've really heard or understood this to be a problem on the flood mapping side of things. And we tried to underscore the point, the fact that flood map funding is appropriated by them, and they had appropriated a robust amount of funding in FY25, very little of which was spent. So we have a number of follow-up items to get back to folks with. But again, I think of all those different topics that Meg talked about, I really did feel like we got some traction, at least on flood map funding. Now, of course, it's one thing to get congressional attention and then maybe to poke FEMA a little bit. It's an entirely different thing to actually get FEMA to do something these days. So, we'll just have to wait and see. One of the other topics, of course, that has been a big one for the better part of a year is the FEMA Review Council. And towards the end of January, I think we had briefed maybe on last month's call that the FEMA Review Council was extended by President Trump for 2 additional months. And so the FEMA Review Council is extended until close to the end of March. And also, there have been a lot of different pieces of rumor, intel, and such in terms of what the Review Council report might include. We had previously heard, and I think some of this made headlines, of course, in December, where there was the Review Council report, at least having the perspective of the members, and then the DHS Secretary's version of it, which was slimmed down and very different. And since that time, and probably most recently, we have it on fairly good intelligence that the Review Council report now seems to be kind of a hybrid. It's going to be in between maybe the slimmed down 40-page versus the 100 and some page report, maybe being about 60 or 70 pages, but it will have a significant section on the National Flood Insurance Program. And that section on the National Flood Insurance Program may track fairly closely with the Neptune report. And we briefed out on the Neptune report previously how basically this was a kind of a report / white paper that was introduced this past fall, making it seeming very easy and innocuous to simply transition the NFIP to the private sector that way. And I think a lot of us who've worked with the program know it's neither that simple. It's certainly not that simple, and something that would require congressional approval to do. Nonetheless, ASFPM, as well as other NGO partners, are comparing. We're trading intel frequently. And, we're preparing for when this report comes out, if there is a major kind of focus on the NFIP, that we would enter into that conversation with, good arguments, good public policy discussions and approaches, and kind of a bit more of the historical perspective, which honestly seems to be missing quite a bit, especially from this Neptune report. So, more to come on that. We also had heard that possibly as early as this week, but it doesn't seem like that will happen, is when we could see the report. Any time between this week and I think towards the end of March now is probably appropriate. And again, before it comes out, it likely will be noticed in the Federal Register. So we'll need to pay attention to that as well. Zooming out to the big picture, it's always important to remember that the Review Council report is a report from this administration's Review Council, and I think there probably are fair questions of, in terms of balance on that council and perspectives that way. But also more importantly, major reforms to the NFIP are going to require Congress. And we also have it, I think, on very good intelligence that there simply is not appetite this year. And it has a lot to do with the congressional calendar, but also the overall priorities of both the House and Senate committees that deal with these things to do any kind of substantive NFIP reform. Nonetheless, we do think it's important to contribute to that bigger public dialogue, to be able to talk about the value of the program, despite the fact that two of the four legs of the NFIP, being the mitigation and the flood mapping, are all but paralyzed at this point. That it still has a role and could have a significant value to the nation that way as well. So we just, we don't have any, we don't have the report, but we did want to pass on at least a bit of what we're hearing, some of the conversations we're having, and certainly we'll make sure that members and folks know as the report itself comes out. So with that, Alicia, I'm happy to wrap up that item, and I think we'll have some time for some of the Q&As. Thank you.
Thanks, Chad. Now to answer a few questions that have come in. Is the shutdown affecting CRS verification visits?
This is Chad. I think I had heard. I think I'd seen something in emails where there was either a expedited process that was being done, or that certain verification visits were being foregone in this last cycle. But again, a lot of times, we may have some good policy folks that have an answer on that as well. If you have a thought on that, throw it in the chat or in the Q&A. David, were you going to say something on that?
Oh, I was just saying, from everything that I have read about the status of Secretary Noem's directives, I would bet that there aren't very many people working on those reviews. I see someone just put in the chat that theirs had been put off.
Yeah, it looks like a few of them. There's now multiple folks in the chat indicating that, yeah, the CRS visits are being postponed. And thank you, Sherry. And again, this is unfortunate, but this seems to be status quo with FEMA these days. The CRS contract's currently awaiting funding. It's been on hold since January 19th. So again, unfortunately, we're hearing that about a number of contracts at FEMA right now.
Okay, thank you for that. There's only one other question in the chat. They're asking about the phrase "held at the desk" and wondering who is preventing things from moving forward.
Oh, okay. That term, "held at the desk," means that a bill may have been reported by a committee or the relevant committees um, with approval, and then the bill goes essentially to the leadership, um, the majority leadership, who pretty much controls what gets put on the agenda to go out for full House consideration. What's going on is that there's just not enough going on over in the Senate for the House folks at the moment to put the bill, put the FEMA Act on the floor. They could do it now pretty much any time, but of course there are a huge number of other issues that are taking Congress's attention. And so if anything sort of begins to seriously gel over on the Senate side, the House might want to get out there in front and help guide the Senate as to what to do. That's what that means. Held at the desk. It's basically the leadership of the House has to decide whether it's time to move forward on that or not.
Thank you for clarifying, David. Another question is asking if there's any advice on what we can do now that no FEMA grants are being paid.
Um, Alicia and Jamie, this is one of those things. Things were tough before, and now that we have the shutdown, things are even more difficult. There is right now, there probably is really nothing that can be done because FEMA is, for all intents and purposes, they have the functions on things like pay of grants and everything are shut down until the budget standoff is solved. Even when that's solved, though, and we recently at the board retreat asked, whether we've seen payments on things like on cap SASE grants, or if there's any mitigation moving or something. We have heard a few instances where mitigation funds are moving when a governor's office or a senator's office or maybe a representative gets involved and really pokes FEMA hard on that kind of stuff. And so unfortunately, I know it's not much to go on, but that is what seems to be working and especially when a governor tries to call the White House directly that way. And Alicia, I know we only have 1 minute, but Peter's question, I'd like to explore that a minute too.
Absolutely. Yeah, that one can be next. It's asking, is it true that insurance agents like mine cannot give me a quote due to the shutdown?
So I would like to ask the group, first of all, if they're experiencing the same thing or not, because the NFIP, as part of the broader budget agreement, was extended to the end of September. It was our understanding that then NFIP policies should still be able to be issued because that had more to do with the authorization of the program, even during this particular shutdown, which is kind of an unusual situation. Usually the shutdown happens and the program has expired. And DHS had provided some guidance along those lines, but we thought it was erroneous that way. So I guess, are other folks not, do folks have any kind of evidence where NFIP quotes are not being able to be given at this point? Because now that you've put that question out there, I feel that may be a little more unsettled than I thought it wasn't. And Tracy, it looks like FloodSmart is giving the quoting option, maybe from a couple of days ago.
I mean, this is David. From everything that I have read in this area, the insurance companies that sell the policies have a go ahead to process and sell those policies, they will get paid. So that should not be getting in the way. That was at least the intention of that rider that they put on the consolidated appropriations bill. But we can look more into that, and will. There should be an open channel to purchase a new policy or renew a policy.
Okay, and it looks like Tolga just posted in the chat that at least the online quoting tool is still working. But again, please reach out on ASFPM's website under policy. There's a button that you can you can email the ASFPM policy team. If any of you are hearing, especially that you can't get a NFIP quote, because kind of our assumption is you can during this kind of peculiar shutdown, we'd like to know that so that we can follow up.
Chad, do you see Valerie Dool's comment or question there? Just up a little ways.
Oh yeah, and just quickly, and then I'll turn back to Alicia. Valerie, it is correct. Even if you have awarded FEMA mitigation grants, what the feedback we've heard, especially from state mitigation officers, they are not being paid even if you have an executed agreement with the state. In particular, payments or drawdown requests that are over $100,000. So if you need to submit a drawdown because you're doing a couple buyouts, those are the ones that are being held up. But we have seen at least some grant funding being approved if the drawdown requests are under $100,000.
This is David again. I will add that from what I've heard, sometimes a little bit of pressure coming in from the congressional delegation, especially the majority, might be able to kick some of those things loose. So probably you don't want to leave your congressional people completely out of the loop on this. But it's a pretty serious problem, very serious problem.
Okay, well, I don't see any other questions in the chat and that we are over time. So thank you all for attending. Please join us on Thursday, March 26th for our next briefing, and we look forward to seeing you then. Bye now.
Thank you.